Hi, I'm Sam from the Danger Planet, and today I'm joined by Brandon
Hey guys.
and two very special guests. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm one of the game designers at Wyrd Games. I work on Malifaux and lots of other things.
And I'm Chris. I am another designer of your games, and I also work on Malifaux and plenty of other things.
So we've somehow tricked Matt and Chris into sitting down with us to talk about the absolutely incredible games that they make, and especially about Gaining Grounds 3, the new tournament packet from Malifaux that just recently dropped. It's been hotly anticipated, and now that it's arrived, we're having a great deal of fun playing it. So we figured we'd ask these guys a little bit about their design philosophy, what goes into making a great game like Malifaux, and maybe just a little hint of what we can expect to see from them in the future.
I think hotly anticipated is a key phrase there. So
I was anticipating it extremely highly.
when we're like, oh, we're gonna put the Errata out early, and then we'll kind of do Gaining Grounds a little bit later, and people are like, why aren't these together? We're like, you know what? We're working on it. Like,
I mean, Gaining Grounds 2 was a really good packet, and I thought it had a lot of life in it, so I wasn't exactly sad to be playing with it, but I do really like the way Gaining Grounds 3 is shaking up the meta.
Yeah.
So, guys, that leads into our first question. Gaining Grounds, we'd like to hear you talk a little bit about your design philosophy behind it, the goals behind it. What do you see as the role of Gaining Grounds in the larger Malifaux game?
yeah, it does a lot of things, and they all kind of work together, but there's a bunch of different goals. So the first and probably main one is just refresh stuff. Get people doing new things after a year, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less of playing the same schemes and strats. Sometimes you want to just see new stuff, and new models obviously do a lot, but people want to play with their old models, and that's a really exciting thing. And so working on here's new strategies, here's new schemes, etc. Is really, really important. There's game variants in Gaining Grounds, which are something that we really like and we think are really fun. And this has been something that we kind of introduced, I think GG1, I don't think it was in GG0, that are there to allow different metas and different group of people, whether or not you're here in the US with us or in the UK or in Texas or whatever, to play the game kind of how you want. And so every year with Gaining Grounds, we've introduced new versions of these like game formats and variants and that kind of stuff that are all kind of really exciting. And so when we were like, hey, here's the bands format, I think people have really attached to stuff like that, and that's one of the kind of general goals, is to allow people to play Malifaux the way they want to. Yeah, Chris, is there another one that I'm forgetting?
I mean, the primary reason is definitely to keep the game fresh. It's kind of incredible to see how people, when you play the same thing over and over again for a year, people kind of get sick of it, and they say as much. And then you release a new Gaining Grounds, and all of a sudden there's so much positivity just because you're doing something new. That's definitely the primary reason. For me, a secondary reason that at least I consider when we put together Gaining Grounds is that it lets us shake things up without having to actually touch any of the models in the game. Rather than having to alter the strength of the models on the table, we can simply alter what it means to be a good model. And that's a great way to change, just the way the game works.
And then the last point that I was kind of thinking about is it's for TOs is a big thing. It's the technical like tournament official document to use, and us saying like, yeah, here's a good way to set up your table for a more competitive environment, or here's how to run a tournament and scores and that kind of stuff, and here's like tips of the trade, and how if you want to have anything to do about painting, here's a good way to do that, and all these kind of different things that an event organizer can kind of use that we can hand out, and they can do whatever they want. And it is really important to say, because I think a lot of TOs don't feel that they have the ability to, but the document is intended to kind of work the way you want it to. If there's something in it that you're like, we don't want to have a 3 paint minimum or whatever is in that document, or we don't want to say you can't proxy or something, it's totally fine by us to play it that way. And we want to give you the ability to change the document out as needed. Because yeah, lots of people are just like, we're gonna play a slightly different version of Malifaux because that's what our local community likes to play.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little Waldo blurb in the document that says, "Do what you want, guys." I've read that. I don't know that everybody else has, but yeah.
Also, minor, I'm going to shout out a podcast, Steam Powered Scoundrels. They now have a little Waldo blurb that says to try out Bonanza Brawl, which is super fun.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't had a chance to play that format of All Out Brawl, super fun, and that's kind of in there as well now, so you can find a link to that kind of information and stuff. So, because shout out to those guys, they're kind of awesome. So,
and we'll provide a link in the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys can all check out that awesome Bonanza Brawl.
So I guess then my question in terms of Gaining Grounds 3, just philosophically, I think that answers it. How do you guys see like a huge upswing in like engagement from Gaining Grounds when that releases? Do you think that the community, I mean, obviously I'm super pumped, but I don't know how big does it get? Does a weird place get more intense, the Discord?
I think it definitely reinvigorates some people. It's because at right now it's kind of at the same cadence as other new content like Malifaux Burns and that kind of stuff, and when these things are coming out are relatively the same time, and so it helps kind of give a rhythm to the community of saying like, hey, we're going to play a lot more during this time and be a little bit more involved, just because new stuff are fun and cool. And at the same time, the times when it is a lull, it's okay to be like, hey, we're going to go play another game or whatever, because when you come back you'll appreciate things more, and playing any game at like a local game store or in your own house like kind of encourages you to play others. So like,
yeah,
these kind of lulls and stuff aren't the worst or anything like that, but definitely when we release new things and new GG and all that kind of stuff, definitely gets people excited, it seems. I always really like listening to people's hot takes and that kind of stuff. So
do you have a lot? I mean, do you think that just Burns was sort of getting to the point where it had really just sort of hit critical mass in terms of things coming out, and that was what did that really factor into the decision to delay Gaining Grounds, or was it more of a design constraint? I mean, it seemed like with 3 or 4 new boxes coming out with new masters and their cards every month, I can't imagine if you had done the Gaining Grounds document changeover when the Errata came out that it would have been as impactful maybe, because it was just a lot, and I really appreciate that you took a bit of a break, I think, in between all of this stuff. I don't know if did that factor into the decision at all, or
a little bit. So the Errata came out because we were like, we need to have an Errata here for the stuff pre Malifaux Burns, and that was really important to get out when it was needed.
Yeah.
Gaining Grounds at that time wasn't needed because things were still kind of coming out. The Errata had a pretty big shakeup to a lot of different crews and that kind of stuff, and so while oftentimes we're going to kind of combine them together into one packet or kind of thing that are coming out at the same time, them being separate was definitely like more of a deliberate choice of one of these things is needed right now, one of these things can wait, and it gave us more time to work on development of other things, work on development of more Malifaux product, which you guys will be seeing soon, which we're really excited about.
Ooh.
So lots of cool stuff, and then also just being able to be like, hey, we're testing Gaining Grounds 3 with all of the stuff that we're working on in the background as well. So like we know that, like, yeah, we know the new stuff that's coming out is going to be okay in this Gaining Grounds. They've seen it, they've played it, that kind of stuff, where we're not going to hit things. I think it was Parker at M2E was released, and then the next Gaining Grounds kind of messed up Parker for a while, and so we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be as big of an issue. So
yeah,
it's also kind of important for like the new Gaining Grounds has 4 entirely new strategies that probably couldn't have happened if it came out 4 or 6 months earlier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely Malifaux Burns, the development of that had a big impact on Gaining Grounds 2, where we developing 4 new strategies for Gaining Grounds 2 would have been kind of problematic at the same time as Malifaux Burns, which Malifaux Burns was a huge project on everyone's part when you touch pretty much everything in the game somehow. Yeah, those things kind of go hand in hand, and so and that's kind of where we're at with GG3 of being able to develop the strats at the same time as everything else.
So speaking of your development process, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of how you make the decisions of what changes you're going to make and how those changes are going to play out? Like what kind of data do you collect or use, or what is your design process going from like a blank slate to a finished document?
For GG specifically?
Yeah, for GG specifically.
Yeah. So we listen to a lot of the feedback from the community, whether it's YouTube channels or podcasts or reading on our forums or reading a Wyrd place or digging into all of the different discords that we're secretly hiding in and all of these different things. We're reading lots of things to see people's responses. And so when Gaining Grounds 2 came out, we listened to a lot of responses, read a lot of responses to that, and see what do people think of that, what of this, and what are they excited for potentially to come. Was definitely a big kind of idea. And then also there's just looking at like when we go around and looking at different tournament packets and we're making our own tournament packets, like what are people excited to play? What are they not excited to play? That's kind of a lot of the data that we're pulling from for what sort of things to include. Chris, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm on the forums a lot, so I look at those things and I read them too. I know when I was working on Gaining Grounds 3, one thing I specifically went back to was when Gaining Grounds 2 was released, or in the weeks leading up to it. People, created posts that were like, "What kinds of things would you like to see?" And then a follow up of, "What kinds of things, did you wish would be in Gaining Grounds 2 that weren't in Gaining Grounds 2?" I know I looked at those pretty heavily as we started the process. I didn't, stick to them or deliberately say it was in here, so I'm going to use that, word for word. But I definitely read through those. And saw what the community was expecting of us or had wanted us to do more of.
Yeah, I know one of the things that I saw a lot with GG2 when it was released, but people were like, yeah, we want some of the killy back of just, we want like, here's a just go murder people strat, which is nice to have in a packet for like, here's a tournament that you can put this at the end of the a tournament or whatever, and it's a little bit less of a mental load. Malifaux is really complicated, and when the goal is just murder each other, it gets a little bit easier. So having ways to do that, and then also like we look at old stuff. What is I can't remember the name of the new scheme, the one where you're pushing payloads across the
Carver Path.
Carver Path. Yeah. So if anyone played old supply wagons in GG or in second edition, that was definitely like thing where like, okay, so supply wagons had problems. People enjoyed it to an extent though, because it was definitely made for silly games. How can we update this and make for a better experience overall, but also be kind of silly? But and then that's kind of the idea of why markers are destroyed, because we're like, this is a really interesting mechanic. And also the idea back when you would do supply wagons and people would just joust them together, which was completely a mistake on our part, and we fixed it really quickly, but it was very, very funny. And so the idea of just these wagons destroying everything in their path definitely had just a chuckle for us, and we were like, that could make for actually really interesting gameplay of seeing, like, there's definitely a lot more marker crews and that kind of stuff, and seeing how it interacts and that kind of stuff. So that was one of the guiding ideas behind that strategy specifically. So.
I'm glad someone else at Wyrd calls it a payload. I feel very vindicated.
It's how is it not a payload?
Exactly, it's the payload. So just now that you have, so that's where you get all these great ideas. So how do you go from kind of a ball of good ideas to a finished document? Like, what's your process?
Lots of playtesting. Thank you, playtesters. This is a big shout out to those people. Yeah. So I feel like I'm talking a lot. I should let Chris say more. Chris, do you want to explain this thought process?
Yeah, you're fine. For like what I experienced through the process was, it was very iterative. So we would put something on a paper, we would look at ourselves and be like, okay, we think this is fine. We throw it to people and be like, this is terrible for all these reasons. Okay, we'll take it back and we'll make some adjustments and we'll try that again. And you do that 3, 4, 5, a dozen times, and what comes out is something that's a lot better than what you started with.
Yeah, I know for GG3 specifically, I think we did it for GG2 as well. Our first document that we handed playtesters, be like, hey, test this, had 8 strategies in it and didn't have any schemes. It just said, use any scheme that you have access to, because it lets us test just the overarching, like, are these fun to play? We'll work on new schemes later, but here's 8 different things, and we'll start cutting them down as soon as people are like, this idea is bad. Which obviously there are bad ideas. Any of our playtesters will know that Malifaux dodgeball, not as fun as you'd think.
Yeah.
Wild. So do you guys have so you definitely do always do strategies first? Is that sort of because they're more
Those are almost
impactful?
always the starter part of the encounters because they're very, very important. And like most of our schemes are kind of either staying the same or pulling from other things. We'll add new schemes in later. And one of the things that we did when we saw that GG2 was kind of the people were playing it for a while is we introduced the all function on the app, which we were very excited by, and just allowing our playtesters to be like, just choose that for schemes. Like, just choose any of the ones that we've released in the past. They will work, and any of the ones that we kind of need to update, we can see what we really like here. So, and then we were like, here, I think we went through like 8 or 9 new schemes, and several of them got cut or reworked into other things or GG3. So.
Yeah, and some of them got cut not because they were bad, but because they didn't really fit with the rest of what we wanted to do. Like, I know our first document had claim jump and leave your mark in the same pool, and that kind of creates a little bit of an issue when you have two extremely center-focused things in the same pool.
Sure.
So we look at things like that once we have a full document and make our cuts.
So for the scheme part of things, do you guys have like a master spreadsheet that we want a center focused one, we want 2 or 3 killy ones, we want some that are specifically like we want one to make Titania really good, is there sort of like an overarching sort of like every gaining grounds has to meet these following criteria?
Unfortunately, it's not as organized as what you would think with that statement.
Okay.
Those things definitely go through our head. Like, we definitely want to be like, there are Achilles schemes. We count how many like scheme markery schemes, so that like, we make sure that certain types of crews can play through these different things.
Yeah.
And we definitely want to be like, cool, here's a thing for people that just want to run straight to the back. Like breakthroughs. As of right now, I can't promise anything for the future, but Breakthrough and Assassinate and Vendetta are some of our favorite things just because they're kind of core to the fundamental like Malifaux experience. Like, always saying like, cool, I could choose to kill my opponent's leader for points is kind of an important backbone to certain aspects of gaining grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of always being there is important, but we also want to have like, yeah, here's a center point strat so that can kind of show up in different ways. The idea of marker-based strats, especially with more markers kind of throwing around. Those are all like things we think about, but we don't necessarily have like, here's a big spreadsheet with that counts everything and does this specifically. It's more play by feel and writing it out as we're iterating, because I think even I think playtesters, like the last couple weeks of playtesting, we were still pulling schemes in and out of the packet to see what worked best. So, and I think there was a 5th strat up until the very last week, and we were like, we need to cut one of them. Which one is our least favorite? So,
but that's fine, because sorry.
Oh no, please go ahead.
It's fine because we can take the process. Like, we don't throw things out when we cut them. We just put them in a file and say we'll look at it for next year. So all the work on that, the 5th strategy that we've done, it's not gone away. It's just getting prepared for the next time we look at things, and maybe it'll make the cut next year, even though it didn't make it this year.
Yeah. What was the 5th strat? Can you tell
Dodgeball.
us? Oh, was it? Okay. Wild.
Just so I can just confirm to get you guys on record, you do not have a priority of making Titania good.
That is not like a thing where like Titania has to be good is not like necessarily 100% our goal. It's maybe like 90% our goal.
89, 99. Yeah, okay.
We definitely
Titania,
want Titania to be good, but we want everyone to be good as
good.
much as we can. I personally love Titania. I think her title form is like one of my favorite playstyles in the game. So
I'm sure her title form will be one of
me,
my favorites when I can figure it out.
For me, it's a lot broader than just I want this keyword to be good. What I like, so for this cycle, something that some people like say in the past was like, Tony's models are good. There's no reason why Tony should be bad. It's just there's never really been like a kind of packet that's benefiting her models. So it's less, okay, I want to make a packet that Tony is good at, and more like, okay, why hasn't Tony's models been successful in a previous packet? And identifying those things, like what makes them good and what hasn't been valuable before, because there's lots of keywords with the same issue. Like Lynch has a similar issue. His models are they're good models. They're just haven't had a packet that works with them, and we can pull those out and on a broader scale be like, okay, this particular subset of keywords, the slow tanky keyword, hasn't had a kind of strategy or scheme that rewards that playstyle, and we can do that on a more broad scale than just we should make Titania good this time.
I see.
Chris coming in with good answers.
So I think it's a great answer, and I think it really leads into the next topic we wanted to talk about, which is the way you think about individual underperforming crews and how you can give them some help. Now, we've talked about this a bit earlier, but normally Gaining Grounds is paired with an errata document that came a little bit apart this year. But could you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts behind the annual errata, sort of the purpose of that errata? What are your thoughts when you go into an errata? Like, what are your priorities each year? And a little bit about your process of how you develop the errata.
Yeah. So first off, it's important to say our priorities change with every errata. It's not going to be the exact same. Our next errata might look and feel kind of different than our previous one, just based on what we need at the time and that kind of thing. But the errata for us is kind of there's like 4 sections to it. There's like FAQ, gaining like core rules errata, and then like buffs and nerfs. And they all kind of play into each other. And sometimes here's an FAQ that like rethinks about a question and making sure that we get it exactly the way we want people to play it and how we intended, that might be seen as a buff or a nerf or etc. Or adjusting the fundamental rules of the game of like, here's a cap on poison and burning damage that is definitely a nerf to certain crews. But at the same time, it's really important to us to kind of feel out and make it play the best way we can. But in terms of just everything across the board, our fundamental goal for the errata is to make the game more enjoyable. That doesn't necessarily mean make a crew better or make a crew worse. It just means make a crew more fun to play for us. Yeah, Chris, do you have any specific examples? While I'm thinking.
All I have to say here is I'm excited to learn how it works out, because I wasn't here for the last errata cycle. So when it comes around again, I'm super excited to learn how that's going to work based on what I know from Gaining Grounds.
Okay, so there's one example that I think is what came out in this last errata that I think is kind of important to talk about, of like a reason we might do something, and that is I think it's Terracotta Warriors and Changelings, and they both lost just like you, which is a really big impactful ability. And basically we found that like when this ability shows up specifically on like minion 3 models, it became really problematic to write masters. Especially we were like, hey, we're in the middle of writing new characters and that kind of stuff, and yeah, then we get to like, cool, in Neverborn and 10 Thunders, we have to write around the fact that some of these actions are being taken 3 times a turn by like 4 stone minions or something.
Yeah.
And it was really problematic. Especially like with Malifaux Burns, there's some things that just didn't work, and there's some things we actually wrote around in sometimes weird ways. The best example I can think about that is like in Malifaux Burns, Yoko Hamasaki Unseen. I forget the name of her action, but it's something along the lines of like draw some cards, and then it follows up with a statement of like, anyone around this model or Chio gets distracted +1. And it feels like a kind of a weird add-on to that action, and it's specifically there so that we could be like, here's a model name, you can't just like me this action, because the rest of this action is really problematic to take 3 times extra in a turn. And so that's kind of the idea of like certain erratas, is to just be like, cool, this makes it maybe easier for us to write other abilities in the game or so on. But like, was it Student of Conflict or Malifaux Child? The one with
Child.
Malifaux Child has just like you, and Malifaux Child is an enforcer, and you can take 1 of. That's way less problematic than these like 3 the 3 times minions.
It also can't really do anything else.
Correct. But at the same time, it let us rework Terracotta Warriors to play a interesting role that like other models can't necessarily play this exact same role, rather than just be a just like you bot and turning into other people. Now they have this like kind of cool, like, yeah, we're just a bunch of like, here's extra shields that's just like 1 HP each, that we thought was kind of a really cool dynamic. And that's in terms of a reason we errata some. Sometimes it's just it's, if we buff something, it's usually about giving it more of a role and making it more fun to play. Rasputina and Wong are both big examples of just, we wanted them to their role to perform a little bit better and be more distinguished in how they work, and so that they can kind of do cooler, more interesting things. I think Rasputina, I think it's her old bonus action we didn't think was fundamental to the like idea of the model. I think so. I can't remember what her old card is at this point. I've seen her new card so much, but the idea of now she has this ability where she can pull an ice pillar and move it along was just a really cool visual for us when you think about a table. I know that idea was very much inspired by Doctor Strange in the Marvel movies of like summoning the portal and teleporting someone.
Mhm.
We just thought that was a really cool visual, and like the idea of like here's her ability to give her crew mobility in a somewhat slow crew. It gave her new form and function, where her other version is a lot more about like summoning and pushing forward in that way. So that it really just distinguished them and made them kind of different. And that was kind of an example of her. And then in terms of nerfs, which obviously nerfs are a big part of the errata, there's generally a lot of them. And people have kind of picked up on when there's a model that is warping the game around it, it becomes kind of problematic. So nerfing that model will and bringing it to kind of the same structure or pace as kind of everyone else will have a lot bigger of an impact than maybe buffing an underperforming model, because that underperforming model, unless we put it into the stratosphere where it warps the game itself, it should hopefully just kind of nest itself in a kind of a perfect balance. Where if we take like here's a super overperforming model like maybe old Nexus or something, and be like anytime Nexus shows up, she warps the game or they warp the game and do a lot, and kind of pulling them down to the point that that isn't as much of an issue, that will change a lot of games rather than the one game she maybe showed up in for something like smaller models like Boltungen. Like Boltungen, really nice change. We really like what we did with them.
Me too.
But it's not going to change the faction as a whole, where like bringing Nexus down means everyone else gets a little bit more playtime.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important, is just making sure that like the things that are warping the faction around them or warping the game around them get brought down to size.
So one of the things that I think, that we sort of are curious about in terms of the errata is, do you have the sort of a mindset behind when releases are out? Like, for instance, we just had 54 new masters, right? So with Malifaux burn stuff, I know we did have a couple of Malifaux burns things errata, mostly McMorning.
It was just McMorning.
It was just McMorning. But is there sort of an onus or like sort of a plan to wait in a errata cycle? Because I mean, obviously you guys were playtesting burn stuff a while ago, but with McMorning being the only thing that's touched, was there sort of you wanted to see a time period of how these function out in the wild before you go in and overcorrect? Is that I mean, maybe that's just me overreading into it, but
I mean, there's definitely like it definitely comes from a yes, we will wait on certain models for just a plethora of reasons.
yeah.
Sometimes it is simply, if we produce a box, we don't want to errata that box and make every card that you buy irrelevant immediately, because that becomes a real big problem in terms of people being able to access the game properly, and there being a lot of confusion. And that's a big reason why, like, yeah, if an erratic shows up directly after a book, it's probably not going to have much of that book. But also, we don't have so much information, just because, like, we need to wait to see how thousands of people playing it rather than our 20 to 30 playtesters. Like, as soon as 1,000 people see something, it'll immediately get a response. And that even happens with like our Waldo's weeklies and stuff. A really, at this point, infamous example is Winston Finnegan, I guess. Winston Finnegan was revealed in a Waldo's weekly, and there was a big hubbub about it. And we're like, you know what? This is worth looking into. And we hadn't pressed print on that book yet. So we're like, okay, we're gonna see what we can do about making this as best as possible. And a lot of that stuff, sometimes it just comes from certain parts of creating the book come later than others. So like minor editing for consistency to make sure things say like non-leader and that kind of stuff. Just making sure that gets in there comes sometimes later, for in terms of sanity and having all of our editors and that kind of stuff look through things. like there is different time periods that we have to adjust and evaluate models, and it's also why pretty much everything that we reveal is always subject to change, because it absolutely can change, and we're always kind of paying attention to all that kind of different stuff. I hope that answers your question, because I know I got off tangent. I can't remember the question.
No, it does. Yeah. So like burn stuff. Like obviously we're gonna wait a while. Like you wouldn't the Errata, the Gaining Grounds, not the Gaining Grounds, sorry. The Errata was too soon to hit Malifaux burn stuff. And I think like I've generally have been involved with some board game production stuff and some other things. So I think I have a better scope on what the turnaround time is between like a thing like Malifaux burns as a concept coming out from, okay, let's go for it, let's pull the trigger. This is what we've decided we're doing, and we've sent all the files to print, to now we're getting staggered releases. Like, can you just sort of go over what really the turnaround time is? Like, okay, so we've decided we're doing Malifaux burns, let's start rules writing and playtesting, the period there to, okay, we're announcing it, and then from announce to end users have their product. Like what is Wyrd sort of, without, obviously if there's too much you can't go into, feel free.
So I can't go into so much, but I can say these books take a long time. There's a lot of work that goes into kind of every aspect of them, and even something as simple as like an FAQ. People don't realize FAQs are hard. They're hard to write. It's a lot of like how much of my lawyer hat do I have to put on today, which I hate doing. I think writing an FAQ is probably my least favorite part of like writing different parts of Malifaux, the different rules, because you have to make sure. What is the?
Was it another?
Yeah, it was another. Yep. So yeah, words like the definition of another, which just really legalese in the English language, which also like not exactly what Malifaux is written in, because we cheat and like remove words and stuff to make it easier and that kind of stuff. And that, like, if you try to read this with 100% like Oxford Dictionary grammar and that kind of stuff, you're not going to have a good time reading Malifaux stat cards. Yeah. And then our FAQ just ended up being like, use common sense, which is a weird thing to write in an FAQ document. But those things take a long time. And like even the new books and the Malifaux Burns book, like those things take like a year to produce. Sometimes it depends on what's going in, and different things come in at different points in the pipeline depending on different schedules and production and so many different reasons. And Chris and I were only a small part of that pie of when something comes out compared to when we're working on it.
Yeah. There was nothing in the past couple of years that would have affected that in any way. So.
Oh right, yeah. No, that checks out.
Oh yeah, that's that's a big part of that I didn't talk about, but yeah.
So that's actually a very interesting point that you say that these FAQs are very difficult for you to write, because sort of when I look at this big collected document that contains errata and FAQ and gaining grounds, I kind of assume I guess that the FAQ would be the easier part because it doesn't involve changing rules. It's just clarifying what the rules already say, although clearly that's not the case. So I'm a little interested in sort of how you decide for the FAQ specifically, where you're not changing rules, but you're just clarifying them for the players, how you decide which are the most pressing questions that you really need to answer, and sort of what your thoughts are on what makes it into the FAQ and what you kind of trust players to figure out on their own.
Yeah. So a lot of it, honestly, if it gets brought up to us and we know an answer and that kind of stuff immediately, like it'll probably make it in if it's clear to us what the question being asked is. Oftentimes people might ask a question and that's not really the question that needs to be answered, because any sort of precedent that we might make in an FAQ can possibly be problematic, but it could also be more of what we intended, and it becomes problematic to write those things around. And so when someone's like, hey, how does this interact with this, and we have to be like, okay, let's figure out an answer, let's read through all of our rules and put on our lawyer hats, but then we have to be like, okay, whatever answer we give, can this be misinterpreted, or I like to use the word maliciously interpreted in a different way? If it is that how much of a problem is that compared to the answer that really needs to be said. And so when I asked about like another, it's just like, this is a very complicated ruling that kind of needs to be done because it's a little ambiguous and that kind of stuff. But the word another is just a common English word. And when you have to put any amount of definement on that doesn't have any amount of wiggle room, it can become complicated. And so sometimes we try to write with wiggle room, and sometimes we just try to be like, this is the definitive answer. And then sometimes I think one of our FAQs is how does face in the crowd work, and we're just like, nope, that's a typo. That like us errataing is not super worth it, so we're just gonna call it as a typo in the FAQ because yeah.
That's,
I think-
yep, makes sense.
I think part of the problem with FAQs is that when you take the time to FAQ something, you have to like make sure you really get it right the second time, because the more times you do it, the harder and harder it gets. Like something I know I've heard Matt rant about is that if we keep revising the same thing and FAQing it over and over again, eventually it's going to get like hard for players to find the correct version of it, and that ends up causing problems when different parts of the community have different versions of the same FAQ. That's something that I know that Matt's trying. We're just trying very, very hard to avoid.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we don't want to be like, here's an FAQ every 2 weeks or whatever. Like, which one's the most updated one? Where are these being found? And all of these different things. Like, if we have a pretty strict structure on kind of how we put these out, which I do wish we did more, but they're a lot of work, and they take us away from other things that honestly, an FAQ, not the most exciting to write. A new model, much more exciting to write.
Even FAQ is less exciting to receive. It's like as someone as part of the community saying, "Oh, new FAQs out" versus new models out, or even new gaining grounds is out.
Yeah,
just different levels of excitement.
I do. I think I was reading part of I think it's the Vassal World series, something, and they made a ruling the other day that we thought was very interesting because
Is this the super rat?
We were paying close attention to this ruling because we thought it was kind of interesting. We were like, yeah, and then like 2 weeks later, they're like, never mind, and we're like, now you see what we're doing. Like,
oh boy,
you understand our thought process on certain things. If you're like, is this right? And then they're like, yeah, and then they're like, oh no. So you like being very careful about how everything's approached, because sometimes we're like, cool. Did we act like, can we say this is how it's intended to work and all these kind of things for an FAQ, compared to like, nope, that's just a typo, and like we kind of have to be like, no, do it this way. Can be a weird thing to write, but also at the same time, like I can't in a like a core book errata be like model X and X and X and X is written wrong and it has a typo. I can't do that. In an FAQ, it's a little bit simpler, and errata's having everyone like print off new cards and us redoing all of our boxes and all this kind of stuff is a lot goes into that, where we can just be like, look, this is how it works in the FAQ. Trust us. But it's also, that's a hard thing for players to be like, yeah, we'll do that. And so it can be really complicated. And so, yeah, that's why I hate FAQs. And I hope all of our players read an FAQ and be like, this is really tedious to read. And be like, you're correct.
So we can
yeah, thank you for
confirm
bringing up the super rat, because we were going to bring it up if you didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you were, because yeah, it's stupid. But the question is like, how's the rules as written? Where the rules have been written a little bit ambiguous, and so when we do officially get around to an FAQ, and that's something that the community overall hasn't been like, this is the accepted answer. If you do it this way, you're wrong. And we like, here's our ruling on the fact. Yeah, like I can't commit to any specific ruling now because I'm not sitting down writing an FAQ with more rule books in it.
Your lawyer's not present. You can't say anything about that without your lawyer present.
Yeah. I will say I appreciate you saying you don't want to put on your lawyer hat, because I am a lawyer and I totally understand why writing FAQs is extremely dull for everybody else. I personally would do it all day, but I have a very weird brain, and I accept that my brain is not like normative for most people.
And at the same time, it's not always just like, this is exactly correct. Sometimes it's like, I guess we just make a call on this because it's ambiguous, and that can be frustrating for some people, and the other people that are like, haha, they agree with me, it can be very liberating. We're like, we just want to make sure that the game is as fun as possible, and so if it's a 50-50 chance, chances are we're ruling in favor of the thing that's more fun to play in.
Yeah.
All right. Very quick. Spot ruling. If McMorning kills a mindless zombie, how many corpse markers does he get?
I don't even know.
Is it 12? That's the really important question.
Okay.
It's
put
probably not 12, but I don't have McMorning's card in front of me. And honestly, I don't even know how you get to 12. So
Yeah, I share that opinion.
Anyways, moving on. So this is very informative though, and I really appreciate the insight into the process. So I guess we have a few questions about the future of Malifaux organized play, because we love gaining grounds. We think you guys are doing a really good job with the errata and the FAQs. Every single one is really shaking up the game in a positive way. So I hope you hear that from us. And we're kind of interested now that it seems like you guys have really hit the swing of gaining grounds and of this. Do you have plans for different things you might be doing in the future, like maybe campaigns or store kits, just things like different things to shake up competitive play beyond the format of gaining grounds, FAQ, and errata?
And to include casual play, right? Everything doesn't have to be specifically for the hardcore tournament grinders,
So basically, what I will point this to of Gaining Grounds, while says is the organized play document of Malifaux, has a lot of things, and I mentioned one already, that are not competitive. I would not go out and be like all out brawl, hyper competitive. Granted, that wasn't that was a lot of work from our community and that kind of stuff using other versions, but us putting out here's just a fun, cool format for a holiday or something, or here's something kind of wacky is always something we enjoy doing and is kind of fun. We also had to think about how much do these get played, because one of the biggest struggles that I have is when we're like, hey, here's a holiday scenario. We put a lot of time and effort into us. We're really, really proud of this. We think it's a lot of fun. And sometimes people don't necessarily give us feedback outwardly about it. So we're like, we don't know what people's thoughts on this are. And so do we do more? Because it's hard to gauge. We're not there at all these games, all these game stores to see people play it. So did it work out? We think so. Anyone that has played it maybe was like, yeah, we like it. So that can be a little bit of a struggle behind trying to do those things, but
so at the very least, I can confirm with two of the holiday schemes. We ran a tournament at our local game store for the Valentine's Day scheme on the Saturday after Valentine's Day. I added the Valentine's Day scheme as a separate sixth scheme to the scheme pool and gave out a special prize specifically for it that was like a prisoner's dilemma style thing surrounded upon the two players that got the most points out of the lover's dilemma, and everyone had a great time. It was huge. And then also this Saturday we're going to a tournament where they're using the leprechaun scheme or Lugercorn scheme.
I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one.
We'll see.
Yeah.
It should be good. I'm looking forward to it. I think
those kind of things are definitely a lot of fun. They are. I'm gonna kind of harp on the fact that I love all of my playtesters so much because they see the weird ones that don't work out. And they're like, yeah, this should never see the light of day ever, because sometimes we're like, here's this crazy idea. But I mean, sometimes we get across things like, here's this strategy that uses candy. I think that one came out. Or Chris had one that was vegetation versus undead. Definitely not based on a very, very famous game.
Oh, wow. Which game could that be?
It's not based on anything.
Skyrim.
Yeah, that checks.
But yeah, those kind of things are kind of fun for us to work on and just kind of stretch our creative legs of just be like, yeah, we don't have to think about sometimes balance is not the most important part. It's, do you have fun? Obviously you want to make sure that it's not so unbalanced that people think it's unfun. But yeah, sometimes you just be like, I want to eat some Mind the Zombies as my big ass botanist, which is fun. And I remember watching Chris create that, which was pretty funny. So lots of stuff like that are things that we always enjoy doing, but it always kind of depends. And I think especially at different times in the year are more likely to come out just based on our production cycle and that kind of stuff of up until Gen Con, right now, gonna have a lot less of those kind of silly frilly things where we're trying to finish up all of our yearly releases and that kind of stuff. But afterwards, and we're like, hey, what stupid ideas do we have?
Can I just put a hat in the ring for an April Fool's Day like reject packet? These are all the things that aren't like don't play these. These are playtest rejects, and then just call it like Gaining Grounds like 3.1 or something. Because that would be wild. I would be a huge fan.
I do think that's kind of funny. I will say I've wanted to put April Fool's Day stuff out for a while, and usually is this worth it? Or like, are people gonna take this too seriously because they don't realize? Because I mean, April Fool's Day is not a thing across the world, and we don't want people to be like, "Yeah, we're playing this really weird dodgeball in Malifaux and having a tournament, and that just causes problems." We're like, "Is this super worth it?" I have wanted to put like silly models out for April Fools, and then we basically always come to the conclusion if we put something like that out, we will be forced to make it, and we don't always want to commit to that.
Yeah.
Which can be a little frustrating, but yeah, lots of silly stuff are always kind of fun. I had a specific example, and now I can't remember what that was, but whatever.
All right. So, and we've got Gen Con coming up, which has historically been a really big time for Wyrd. So, I'm just kind of, I'm not going to ask you any specific details, but I'm just kind of interested in how Gen Con fits into your internal calendar and how you plan around that. And is there sort of this idea, that this expectation that every year you're going to have something really fun and new and big to reveal there?
Gen Con is really important to us. Gen Con is really important to every single person in this hobby because there's lots of reveals, there's lots of new releases and that kind of stuff. And it's definitely something we like to have on our mind year round. We pretty sure our producer plans for Gen Con the day after Gen Con. So if not earlier than that, it's really important. In terms of like cool new stuff, yeah, of course we want to have cool new stuff. Every year for the past however many years, we've had our Mist model, we've had Nightmare models, we've had sometimes early releases, we've had plenty of different stuff, like so many of these different things, and it always is just an exciting time for us. This kind of part of like, here's like late or I guess early summer starts I think in August, so like or in July, so like kind of early midsummer. Here's all this cool new exciting stuff to get everyone kind of hyped and excited. And we just showed off our Nightmare box for this year, which I think all the people I've spoken to personally and our feedback from all 9 has been really, really positive. I think we're all really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm never gonna play Hoffman ever, like never. I'm just not gonna do it. But oh god, am I buying that box set and the accompanying one later, like for sure.
I think Nightmare boxes are super exciting. I still love the 1988 box. It's amazing.
My wife is also probably going to paint the Dia de los Muertos box, and she doesn't even really play miniature games, but she's really struck by those models.
Yeah.
So.
Also, never gonna play Sonya. Absolutely windmill slamming that Rotten Harvest set for sure.
The Lady Justice,
yes, Lady
Justice. Rotten Harvest came around a couple years ago, and it came around as like, hey, here's this idea we wanted to put out an alt model, and we're like, okay, we could do this kind of line, and then people were really, really attached to it, and then we kind of kept going, and it's something just like really fun to us, and we think about it differently than a Nightmare box because. To us, like Rotten Harvest has always kind of been like, yeah, this is not, it's not the character, where like the Nightmare box is like, yeah, this is Gumdrop or something, who is not Mayfang. Like there are different people in our lore and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or Adiadora and Nakima.
And all these different cool, fun people that kind of expand our lore in crazy ways, where like the Rotten Harvest is like, yeah, this is just Pandora in a witch outfit, which is just fun. And then Lady Justice and the new Dia de los Muertos stuff. I don't know if I can say that isn't her, but I maybe it's her just putting on a magical Halloween costume. I don't have the exact answer on that, but it's still very much like, yeah, this is not her. Even though I think the name of that model is La Katrina.
La Katrina,
yeah. And I don't know. I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited about. That's not necessarily Gen Con. That's slightly later in the year. I am excited about this year's Gen Con releases, and when we're recording this, we're putting out kind of our last pre-Gen Con Waldo's Weekly tomorrow. And so lots of cool stuff to talk about last week. Honestly, people reading into our one line at the end of last week's Waldo's Weekly and making lots of bear memes have been really funny. So we're excited to see kind of what people think of all the releases that come with that. So
Matt and Chris, thank you so much for your time and for coming on. We really appreciate you putting up with us, answering our questions, and your willingness to just come out and talk to the community. And I really feel like this has been a great interview, and I've learned a lot from it. And I really can't wait to share this with people.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming, guys. Huge thanks. And I hope that in the future we can do something else like this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It was a pleasure to be here. I like talking about this stuff, and I think this is Chris's first time. So
this is my first time on a podcast and things like that. At least in an official Wyrd capacity, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, it was great to have us, or great for you to have us. I at least enjoyed my time. I love your guys' content, so I'm gonna shout out you guys because it's a great place, and there's lots of other community places to see. If you're on the Wyrd official Discord, that's a great place to get information. If you're on a Wyrd place, that's a great place to get information. But there's so many different community podcasts and YouTube channels and tons of different Discords, and I can't name them all because I don't even know them all. But please, if you're watching this, listen to this, however you're doing it, go check out all the different places. They're all amazing. We love you guys all.
And we think your game is great, and we think you guys are great. So just keep doing what you're doing. So we hope you guys enjoyed that. It's a lot of fun to talk to Matt and Chris. These guys are real smart, and the game they make is incredible. And we hope that you guys really enjoyed this interview and learned a lot about Malifaux. I certainly did.
Yeah. And make sure to take a look at our Discord information so you can see what we're up to, and that'll be down in the description along with all the links that we mentioned in the video and what you can see us up to next.
Yeah, so please like the video if you liked it, subscribe, and leave a comment, some feedback on what a good job you think these guys are doing. Positive vibes only. And until next time, enjoy. Is Waldo nice in person?
Waldo's a jackass.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that's very much the impression I got.
He's but
I remember one time I was like, oh, I wonder what Wyrd headquarters looks like, and it's just like an office park, and I was like, why did I expect anything else?
It looks like a fucking warehouse.
Why did that just makes sense? Like,
I had trouble finding it, to be honest.
I guess I was expecting like a giant building shaped like Waldo with like fire coming out of it. I'm like, no, makes sense.
Well, when you do build a giant building shaped like Waldo with fire coming out of it, we're definitely coming down for a tour.
I'm gonna very quickly apologize. My new puppy is not upset that I put him in a crate in our bedroom.
I have my pup right here.
Up a storm.
I have my pup right here.
Understandable. I had to move my rabbit into this bedroom because it's the only air-conditioned room, and she got sulky.
It could be next week. I mean, if there's a time frame that you want us to do, so you could include other things, like I'll do anything you say, literally anything.
Anyways,
that's good to know.
Let's talk Gaining Grounds and other Malifaux content. Couldn't get you guys to laugh with my Lego Millennium Falcon.
It was good.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at my other screen.
Yeah, I was setting up. I was taking the opportunity to check my sound as well.
I think it was important to stay quiet.